Mark Carney is now officially entering the race for Liberal leader.
I'm doing this because Canada is the best country in the world, but it still could be even better.
Now, so far, carbon prices have been applied sparingly. They've been set far too low.
But everyone should try to have a price on carbon.
The U.S. doesn't have any of that. Doesn't have a carbon price today, doesn't even have a gas tax. There has been, in some jurisdictions, more success putting in place not just a carbon price today, but the prospect of higher carbon price over time. It's an issue. It's definitely an issue.
Mark Carney, the Liberals' poster child for globalist policies and green zealotry, launched his official campaign right here in Alberta, in the heart of the oil patch, on Thursday. Yes, right in the heart of the oil patch, he wants to phase out. Carney's very boring campaign launch actually started off really exciting, however, perfectly liberal. Why? Because he called the cops on independent journalists who had been accredited to attend his event. Look at this.
So the entire community center has trespassed us, or was it the campaign?
The private event. Yeah, the private event.
Okay, but they haven't booked this like playground.
No, but it is part of the property, so we're gonna get you to be off the property.
Okay.
You're free to film from there, but
Sure, yeah. Well, thanks for being so professional about this. It's strange treatment from someone who wants to be the Prime Minister of this country.
Now, after that, Carney did what all the Liberals seem to be doing, distancing themselves from the carbon tax. Look at this.
If you were going to take out the carbon tax, you should replace it with something that is at least, if not more, effective. And by effective, it's not just having the same impact in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but it's making our companies more competitive, it's creating jobs, it's ensuring that Canadian households are made whole in terms of their finances. Because perception may be that it takes out more than the rebate provides, but reality is different. And Canadians will miss that money. So you need a comprehensive approach. You need a comprehensive plan, not just a soundbite that fits on a lectern. And that, again, is the difference between me and some others. I don't do a little leak. I don't do a soundbite. I do a comprehensive plan that addresses all the aspects, and you'll see that in the coming weeks.
But Carney really did a soft launch to an anti-Trump liberal American audience earlier in a scripted and bizarre interview with American pseudo-pundit / comedian Jon Stewart. Take a listen.
What are they making up there of the overtures and sort of trolling to Canada about being a part of the United States?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is not going to happen. The overture. I mean,
because you don't want
well,
to be with.
We're we're proud. We find you very attractive, but we're not moving in with you. It's not you, it's us.
It's really difficult for a candidate to come in who is saddled with the policies that are
But let's say.
Oh boy.
Let's say, just throwing out a
Look
wild
at you trying to preserve the relationship all of a sudden.
A wild hypothetical. Let's say the candidate wasn't part of the government. Let's say the candidate did have a lot of economic experience. Let's say the candidate did deal with crises. Let's say the candidate had a plan to deal with the challenges in the here and now.
Sneaky, you're running as an outsider.
Visit meettheliberals.ca to learn more about Carney and the rest of the Liberal insiders vying to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as Liberal Party leader on March 9th, and as a result, become the very short-lived Prime Minister of Canada before Canadians throw the Liberals out in a general election. Now, the rumor mill is buzzing that Carney might announce his intentions to abandon the consumer carbon tax if he takes the reins of the Liberal Party. Sounds like a desperate move, doesn't it? But the Liberals are a desperate bunch. They are desperate to jettison their wildly unpopular flagship policy of taxing everything that moves, heats, turns on, grows, is bought, sold, or made in this country. So, like everything. And all this after telling us the unbelievable lie that giving the government your money in a climate Ponzi scheme would result in more money back to you in return. That's a pyramid scheme. People go to jail for that in the private sector. But don't let the liberal come to Jesus moment on the reality of the carbon tax fool you. Carney's entire career has been built on advocating for carbon pricing schemes that punish ordinary people while enriching his elite friends. So who's Mark Carney? Here's the Coles Notes version for those of you who don't know. He was born in 1965 in the Northwest Territories, raised in Alberta. He's an economist and a banker or bankster, depending on your viewpoint. He spent 13 years at Goldman Sachs in London, Tokyo, New York, and Toronto. In 2003, he joined the Bank of Canada, and by 2008, he was its governor. In 2013, he was the governor of the Bank of England. He held that position until 2020, and now he serves as the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance. What he does there? Well, he works to debank and de-insure energy projects. In 2020, he also joined Brookfield Asset Management to enforce ESG policies. It's more of the same of what he did at the United Nations, but now with proposed access to billions of dollars in Canadian pension plans to just green those up too. Oh, and in 2020, that was a big year for Carney because he became a Trudeau advisor on COVID and then now more recently on the economy. But knowing what you know now about his history of work with the United Nations and with Brookfield, does that sound like someone's ready to abandon the carbon tax, the green ESG guy from the United Nations? Now, what's more likely? That Carney has suddenly had a change of heart about the Liberal signature policy, or that he's just cooking up a rebrand to keep the Liberals in power? Well, let's go through some of his historical comments. In a 2021 interview, Carney celebrated Canada's carbon tax as the first best policy and complained that the U.S. hadn't adopted a carbon tax of their own.
I'm not saying this because I'm Canadian, but that's first best policy. And that is, the U.S. doesn't have any of that. Doesn't have a carbon price today, doesn't even have a gas tax, doesn't have a prospect of a credible path for a carbon price. And how much of a problem is that? It's an issue. It's definitely an issue.
Carney's repeatedly said that carbon taxes aren't high enough, stating that prices need to soar to $100 a ton to meet his wild net zero fantasies.
And the second solution is to price pollution, to price the externality. Now, so far, carbon prices have been applied sparingly. They've been set far too low, in the single digits on average globally, well short of the estimated $80 to $100 a ton needed by the end of this decade to keep us on track to net zero.
Also in 2021, Carney said, everyone should try to have a price on carbon. Our goal is to get the coverage of a carbon price up to about 2/3 of global emissions by the end of the decade.
I do think, look, first best, Christian, is we would have a global carbon price. It wouldn't exactly match, the level of the price would be higher maybe in the UK than it is in some, sub-Saharan developing African or small island state, given the relative resources. But everyone should try to have a price on carbon. I'm not naive about it, though. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. One of the objectives that President von der Leyen and Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Minister Sweden, the head of the World Trade Organization, myself talked about yesterday, was to get the coverage of a carbon price, though, up to about 2/3 of global emissions by the end of this decade.
Carney's even praised Trudeau's carbon tax for its certainty and called it a success because it supposedly shifts costs while reimbursing Canadians. Again, there's the Ponzi scheme.
There has been in some jurisdictions more success putting in place not just a carbon price today, but the prospect of higher carbon price over time with a mechanism that involves rebates to individuals that move it from being a regressive tax to a progressive tax. And Canada, for example, does that, and about 70% of Canadians are at least made whole. But the relative price of carbon has shifted.
Carney rarely speaks plainly, however, about the real impact of his policies. He prefers long, rambling answers filled with academic jargon to obscure the simple truth. He supports policies that make you poor, that make your gas, groceries, and heating bills skyrocket. Carney's carbon tax obsession is just another tool to push a green agenda that hurts working-class Canadians while rewarding well-connected elites. Carney's even advocated for a ban on gas and diesel vehicles.
Because of the political dynamics, you need enough of a consensus for this to be credible, which is you want to lay out a path for tougher regulation down the road. So the advantage in the UK of saying there's no new internal combustion engine cars sold there after 2030 is it's credible, and it's spurring investment in the UK in plants and other things.
Seems like so many of Trudeau's bad ideas came directly from his favorite advisor, Mark Carney. No matter what he says, whether it's scrapping the consumer carbon tax or proposing a mythical better plan that will ultimately be passed along down to the consumer anyway, it's all smoke and mirrors. Mark Carney is a true believer in carbon taxes and green policies that undermine Canada's economy and our sovereignty. Don't be fooled by his polished rhetoric or his strategic, shameless, opportunistic rebranding. Carney's track record speaks for itself. He's a climate zealot, but he can afford it. You can't. Carney's leadership would be a continuation or even an escalation of Trudeau's already disastrous policies. Carney is an out-of-touch elitist pushing a costly international green agenda onto the backs of hardworking Canadians. Remember that as the Liberals and the media parade him as their next savior. Don't buy into this charade. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. To learn more about Carney and the other Liberal insiders vying to replace Justin Trudeau as the leader of the party and to serve a very short term as the Prime Minister of this country, please go to meettheliberals.ca.